At 20 minutes past 8 o'clock, welcome back. You're live on the AM Report. It's great to see you this Wednesday morning. I'm Mashiane. Let's shift away from the State Capital Commission of Inquiry's report for a moment and have this important discussion. For the first time, domestic workers will earn the same minimum wage as other workers in South Africa. And this follows the Labour Department's opening up public comments for a proposal to hike it by inflation plus 1%. And commissioners at the National Minimum Wage Commission agreed to include the domestic workers in that determination. For reaction, let's bring in the United Democratic Workers of South Africa's founder, Mashiane, who joins us now via our video link to also unpack what this means for its members. Pinky, thanks for making time. It's great to see you. Let's begin by first understanding how we got here. I imagine part of the many questions that people might have is why were domestic workers left behind to begin with when the conversation around being paid the minimum wage was taking place?
Happy New Year, Ayanda, and to Newzroom Afrika listeners, viewers. As we all know, domestic work sector is a sector like no other sector where domestic workers are working as individuals and working for individuals who've got their own regulations and rules in their homes. That's why it's been so difficult for domestic workers to be where we are today. We welcome the national minimum wage of 23 rand 10 cents an hour. Though it's not a living wage, it is something for domestic workers who are underpaid and exploited. At least there's something, but you also need to have enforcement by the Department of Labor and compliance by the employers, of which is going to be a big challenge, the compliance by employers.
Yeah. Help us understand where we are in the process. Is it a far-gone conclusion now that domestic workers will legally be expected to be paid the minimum wage?
Yes, it is finalized. We are getting 23 rand 10 cents an hour from 2022.
Right, right. As you've mentioned, the sector itself is unique in the sense that it is an agreement mostly between two parties. And, you know, the well-rehearsed argument is that if you introduce a minimum wage in any sector, you run the risk of increasing unemployment because some workers may simply say, well, we can't afford to meet this requirement. How much of a factor is that in the discussions that took place in your sector?
There are domestic workers who are earning more than the minimum wage. As I was calculating, it is about 187 rand, 184 rand if you are working for 8 hours a day. And we have domestic workers who are working for 250 and 300 and more a day. So it's not all employers that cannot afford it. But we are saying to employers who are saying they cannot afford it. Instead of paying a salary of a person who's working for 3 days while I'm working for 6 days, let them reduce the number of days and not reduce the salary so that I can look for other job or I can do something else to make that money.
How worried are you that this is going to be quite difficult to implement because of the lack of regulation within the sector itself?
Not that much worried because the domestic work sector is one where that will never be swept away. It's where domestic workers are looking at the employers' children, are looking after houses, the aged, the sick. They need them. And to make their salaries as employers or to make their money as business people. I'm not that worried because, as I said, that many domestic workers are earning more than that. Just a bit worried about compliance because it's going to be difficult for other employers to comply. And even for domestic workers to speak about this to employers is another challenge. But we'll use the pamphlets that we'll get from the Department of Labor and booklets, whatever that we'll get, to try to get it to the employers in many ways that we always do when we want employers to get information from the domestic workers. It's unfortunate for those unorganized domestic workers. It's going to be a challenge to them.
Absolutely. You're touching on an aspect I was hoping we'll be able to speak about, power dynamics within that setup. I mean, even for instance, a domestic worker watching our discussion, wanting to raise this with their employer, it's difficult for them not to consider whether or not even raising the conversation may put their job at risk.
I think domestic workers, sometimes they should test the water. I have seen that employers are preferring to speak with their domestic workers as the people who are working for them before the unions intervene. Domestic workers have to find a way and skills to approach the employers, even to get the leaflets from the Department of Labor and put it on the table or in the post box for employers when they come in, they found that leaflet there and see the reaction after that, what the employers are doing. That's why I say there are many ways to to do this, to make employers get this information.
And speak to us about what kind of mitigation strategies are there for employers who do push back, those who do victimize some of the people who work for them.
We have been taking cases of underpayment to the Department of Labor, and we have been successful. More especially when the domestic worker is dismissed by the employer who was underpaid by the employer. At the Department of Labor, they will make sure that that employer pays what was supposed to be paid to the domestic worker for that year, the minimum wage of the year. So that's what we're going to use for domestic workers who are underpaid. We'll be working with the Department of Labor and seek advices from them.
Yeah, all right. And domestic workers, I presume, who need help in ironing out these issues can reach out to your organization. Is that right?
Yes.
Right, absolutely. Thank you so much for helping us understand this a bit better. Really do appreciate your time. Pinky Mashiane is the founder of the United Domestic Workers of South Africa. It's a union, and we understand that part of the work that's being done now is to ensure that there is a rollout of this new legislation, for lack of a better term, where domestic workers in the country are now expected to be paid, like other workers, at the very least, the minimum wage. Pinky, once again, thanks very much indeed.